Welcome to the Capitol Rundown. I'm Kara Sundlun. This is where we bring you politics that matter to you from both sides of the aisle. For the Republicans, we have former House Speaker Themis Klarides and Democratic strategist Jimmy Tickey. Thank you both, insiders, for being here. I say this every week, but it's a busy week. And this time we had what Trump called, I'll say that because it is not the official name, but what Trump calls the big, beautiful bill, and it passed. So we want to first talk about winners and losers, and specifically your wallet at home. So Themis, let me start with you. I know you haven't always agreed with the president on some things, but sometimes you're in step on policy. Do you think this is a good bill, and should it have passed? And are there some things that you like about it?
Well, similar to a state budget, these are huge bills, and there's a lot of things in them. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines, and there's always good things in a budget bill, and then there's always bad things in a budget bill. You just have to make the decision. Are there more good things than bad things? I mean, in this bill, the good things for states like Connecticut, I'll tell you what the SALT tax deductions, which are your state and local taxes, so basically our property taxes. In states like Connecticut and New York and New Jersey and California, where we have very high property taxes, we are not able to deduct more than $10,000 on our federal income tax until now. And so there was a big discussion and big negotiation. It was actually almost holding up the budget bill. So that is now increased to $40,000, which will be a huge help for states like ours. In addition to that, I mean, there's corporate taxes will go down, which I'm sure Jimmy does not like. But and most people will say, well, how does that help me? Like, I'm not a big corporation. Why am I going to be helped by that? Because when tax credits are given to corporations and their machinery and their equipment, they'll be able to get them much cheaper because of the tax credits. That means they can build more businesses. They can build up their business. And when you build more business and build up their business, there's more jobs and people can go to work, and then people spend money. And, it's just good for the economy in general. I think that there are certainly problems with it. The tax cuts from 2017 from Trump the first time around are set to expire at the end of this year, and this allows them to continue. But that's $3.7 trillion to our deficit. But what people need to remember, and I think this is back to there's always good things and there's bad things in it. Yes, the deficit will increase. But historically, when taxes are cut, revenue grows and the economy grows, which means when you have to pay less taxes, that's more money in your pocket. That means you're going to spend more money. That means businesses are going to get more money. That means more disposable income is out there, and the economy grows. So the notion that, it adds to the federal deficit, yes, it does, but that's assuming everything stays exactly as it is today. The economy will grow because of those tax increases, and it will really help a lot of middle-class people in this country.
Okay. Jimmy, your take?
Well, I think the only thing that was positive about the bill was the SALT deductions, which we've talked about, because that is a benefit to Connecticut and to some of the New England states that do see those higher property taxes. But other than that, this is a big, bad bill. Even some Republicans voted against it because it adds $4 trillion to the deficit that our country has.
That's what NVIDIA's worth now.
Oh, well, there we go.
They just announced. Yeah,
well, there we go. And, it makes significant cuts to people that people will experience. And people right here in Connecticut, major cuts to food and nutrition programs, to school lunch programs. There's already been some reporting around the state of Connecticut about the cuts that would be made to many of our towns and cities in Connecticut, real dollars that towns and school systems would need to be made up for their school lunches, food and nutrition programs. Major cuts to Medicaid, which we've talked about, which was always the plan and always the blueprint in this Republican Congress to cut Medicaid. About 17 million people will lose their Medicaid, whether you are seniors, young people, women, the disabled, veterans. They will see a loss of their Medicaid, and if they don't see a loss of their Medicaid, they will see an increase in prices. So it adds to the amount of money that people need to spend to get their health care, if they even still have health care. The bill was clever. Those cuts don't happen immediately. They happen in late 2026, on the other side of the midterm elections in 2026. So people will not see these effects immediately. They will see them in the future.
I did not know that.
Yes. And something is wrong when you're seeing prices that will be increasing for working people and seeing the programs that they count on are cut, yet the largest tax cuts, even greater than the first Trump term, for the largest multinational corporations. It's the largest transfer of wealth from the working poor and working class to multinational corporations.
In addition to that, I mean, and I certainly agree with the issue with the Medicaid cuts, and that's why several Republicans didn't vote for it. The other reason some Republicans didn't vote for it is because there wasn't enough spending cuts. Now, Now, the question of cuts is, where are you cutting, right? I mean, those people that are will be losing their Medicaid, that's problematic, and I think that needs to be revisited. I think that certainly needs to be revisited. But in addition, there was tips and overtime tax deductions. So if you are a tip worker, if you're a nail technician, work at a hair salon, if you are a bartender, a waitress, you are able to deduct up to $25,000 of your tips on your federal income tax.
You're going to pay less money, less taxes on tips
and your
overtime.
overtime up to $12,500. Now, the interesting part of that for me was that almost 40% of tip workers don't file federal income tax at all right now because they don't reach the threshold to file federal income tax. And of all of our workforce, just a little over 2% of our workers are tip workers. So, it's an interesting dynamic. But to your point about when it will start and when it will end, that the tip workers and the overtime deductions will end right after Trump leaves office.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
Those are not permanent.
Yes.
Those are not permanent, and what is permanent and has no end date is the massive tax cut to billionaires and to multinational corporations. But the no tax on tips, as it was called during the campaign, that does expire.
And a massive tax cut on the middle class is what it is. It's not just to millionaires and billionaires.
There's a tax cut for the middle class, too.
Do you consider yourself a millionaire?
Definitely not.
Okay, and you pay a lot of property taxes.
Yes, but when people are getting health care cut, when people are getting food and nutrition programs cut, you're looking at the amount of...
It affects the middle class, too. I mean, I get it affects corporations, but it affects, in this day and age, in states like ours, those property taxes, people say, are their number one most burdensome tax that they pay. So, pros and cons to all of it.
I don't know if you know this, but let's just say we live in Connecticut and you have a house and you're going to be able to deduct more now. You can only deduct $10,000. Now you're going to be able to deduct $20,000 or $30,000 in state and local taxes. How much does that really translate to money in your pocket?
I don't know the exact number, but it translates to a lot. I mean, we all know. We know the property tax burden in this state, and there's
real money back.
There's certain towns and states towns that are much higher and much lower. I mean, I think Shelton is pretty low.
Yeah,
right?
Woodbridge
is very high.
On salt tax,
that's where we're talking about our house tax.
Yes,
property
you could only
taxes.
cap it at $10,000. Now you can cap it for a higher amount. So
That'll
you will
be real
see,
money for
that
homeowners.
is real money.
Right.
Yes,
not for people who rent or things like that.
Which interestingly was often the case. That changed in the first Trump term, but there was a lot talked about it, especially from New England states. Democrats and Republicans even agreed on this to increase that. So that is a benefit. But again, something is wrong when you are seeing the cuts to healthcare, to food and nutrition programs, to programs that people count on. Though that makes it a difference to the amount of money that they have in their pocket that they're now going to have to spend on healthcare and on food and nutrition programs.
All right, so we're going to switch gears because we could go on, but it's good that we know some of the intricacies of this. We know that President Trump right now is in Texas, a week after the devastating flooding. There has been talk that he wanted to cut, and he did cut, a lot of the professional federal weather folks, saying the states can also, with FEMA's a mess, I want to cut it, states can handle it. Now we see this catastrophic flooding. We have hundreds of people killed or missing, including children. And he's there now. So I think it begs the question. We have a lot of flooding here in Connecticut, and what's going to happen? Is the federal government getting out of the business of saving us when a natural disaster happens, Themis?
I think with President Trump, you really never know if he's just saying things to say things or he's really going to follow through with them. I will say this. With the cuts that he has suggested to FEMA, and people need to remember, and I didn't know this until last year when we had, because I lived through it with the flooding in the lower Naugatuck Valley that affected my family's businesses, that FEMA really only helps residences. They don't help businesses. They partner with the Small Business Administration, the SBA, for small business loans, but they're not actually doing business, doing residences. And if all the cuts to staff and budgets and funding and all the things that he's talking about doing and raising the threshold for what damage you have to have before the FEMA will pay you, if those things all go into play, between 2008 and 2024, 71% of the disasters would not have been covered. And we just in Connecticut had $6 billion of losses in the past 3 years for natural disasters. So putting all that burden on the states is going to be a huge burden for the states and a big loss for people with businesses. I mean, I know in the legislature at the end of this year, they passed a bill that the governor, I think, initiated and the legislature supported for more disclosure for residences that are being sold or bought in regards to what the flooding situation is. Coastal flood plans for planning and development kind of purposes, and reinforcing bridges and roads that are near places that are near the water to at least help us infrastructure-wise and help people become aware of what they're purchasing or when they're developing homes, how they're developing them.
Yeah, and a lot of us. I mean, I used to live downtown in Hartford, and that was still a flood zone, despite it hadn't flooded in 100 years or so. But that's where it was. So it does cost us more with insurance and things like that. But Jimmy, what's your take on this kind of fend for yourself as a state if that happens?
Right. Well, people often don't realize you may be in a flood zone. You might live by a stream, but these 100-year storms seem to be happening every couple of years, and we see streams become full-on rivers, take down bridges, impact our infrastructure. We saw it just last year in the Naugatuck Valley, where Themis and I are from. We've also seen other disasters like the wildfires in central Connecticut as well. So we're seeing more of these sort of natural disasters. We are seeing more water runoff and watershed from these hurricanes. And so when you talk about that, you have to realize that, again, this federal administration has cut billions of dollars to NOAA, NOAA, which deals with a lot of the modeling, as well as the National Weather Service, so that we can depend on some of the modeling to understand where are these storms being predicted, and they can work with states to understand what is the disaster that's coming our way. So cuts in this particular area is not wise, because we need to know where are these storms happening. They're happening more frequently. They're happening with greater intensity. There is a change in the climate and in the weather events that we are seeing, and that has a major impact on people, and people need to be prepared. In Connecticut, people should go to ctalert.gov, and they can sign up for these reverse 911 or alerts when there is a natural disaster, so that they can understand if a flood is happening, if a hurricane is being predicted in your area. And sometimes these things happen very quickly. It was not so long ago we even had a tornado touchdown.
Right.
So people need to be prepared. So by signing up at ctalert.gov allows them to just know what's happening when there is a true disaster happening, and to be prepared with your family to think about where would you go if you needed to evacuate your home, and to really have these conversations as we are approaching the hurricane season.
And to follow up on that, and you'd mentioned downtown Hartford's a flood zone, and being prepared. In the lower Naugatuck Valley, where the floods occurred last summer, that wasn't even a flood zone.
Right.
It's not like it's a flood
Or
zone, but
flash
nothing
flooding
happened
like we saw in
in
Texas.
100 years. I mean, there was no thunderstorms, there was no anything. So, I mean, really, the way the climate is changing, you don't know what's happening. And I think it's important to make sure we're prepared.
Yes.
So it sounds like you're both on the same page about that. But if the funding is cut, does that mean we're going to have to pay more in the state? And
Yes.
what about these new flooding laws?
It puts it on the states.
That's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
he
it's going to be more in
Yes.
everyone's pocketbook.
He point blank said it. He said, I want that to go to the states more, because if you have a disaster and you need help, and the federal government is not doing it, somebody has to do it. I mean,
Do we have the money in the state budget? Is more money coming? What about these new flooding laws?
This is in part the point of the rainy day fund, which Connecticut now has approaching $5 billion. I mean, the governor has said this rainy day fund is for the times that need it, to help in recessions or to help in ways that we need it. If this federal administration is successful in cutting these sorts of programs, you must be prepared for storms. You can't just turn your back to the science. I give Themis credit because not every Republican says that. And you must realize that these weather events do happen, and they are devastating. Look what happened in Texas and the loss of life. So to be prepared, and if the state needs to, for then the state to step up and help in these ways that allow families and allow communities to be prepared.
Yeah, President Trump saying he'll give Texas whatever he wants, whatever they need.
Right.
But I guess we don't know. If these things go away, it's not as guaranteed as it used to be.
And if he wants to restructure that, I don't have a problem with getting rid of waste, getting rid of things that don't work, because government, whether it's federal or state, are full of things that do not work, that people either do not avail themselves of because it's not really necessary and it's some government program, or it's not working, or it's wasteful. I mean, there is a lot of that going on. If you want to tighten up the process and make it more efficient and therefore effective for people, that's one thing. But to just, but that's his way, right? I mean, that's what he does. He just throws everything out there and says, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut that, and you do it on your own. I think he knows that is not the solution to this. I think he really knows that.
And you have to realize it's penny wise and pound foolish. If you're cutting all of the preparations and then these storms will still happen, you're spending more money on the back end to help communities come back when we could have been more prepared to know where these storms are going to hit, working with municipal, county, state leaders to ensure that the word gets out and we can make those preparations in advance to really mitigate the damage that will inevitably happen from a weather event.
And we've seen it certainly here. We have
Yes.
even the crazy ticks. Pleasure Beach and Bridgeport shut down because of the Asian horn tick. So more to be thought about, but that is something to think about how it could, interestingly, you're both on the same page because it affects both the Republican and Democrat folks if we all start paying, if you're in an area where you might see this. I'm aware of time, but we must end and pay homage to, we've been doing a lot of court cases around here, but Themis, I would like to just take a moment, I know you were close with the family, and recognize Hugh Keefe, who was known as a defense attorney giant, as a litigation giant, who passed away this morning, and certainly he was known on both sides of the aisle, but as a giant in his field.
It was a man that I knew for over 30 years. His wife is a friend from childhood. She's a judge. They found each other. They had this amazing marriage, of love. I'm gonna cry, and respect. And he just was an amazing man. He gave so much to the legal community in Connecticut. He volunteered. He taught at Yale Law School. He volunteered his time in all sorts of areas, and it's a huge loss to the state of Connecticut, and my heart goes out to Tara and the family.
Thank you, thank you. Certainly, we've all covered many of the trials that he was as a defense attorney, and reading about him, how he really was able to change people's lives, and often did that, where innocent people would go free, and even finding in his famous case where they actually used DNA evidence and found the real killer. So just a remarkable career, and I know many young lawyers looking up to him. So thank you for that. All of this is available if you want to listen to it again, talk about it over the dinner table. We really want to have balanced politics from both sides of the aisle. Go to WFSB.com, click on local news. That's where you'll find Capitol Rundown. Also streaming on WFSB Plus, always, and on our WFSB YouTube channel. I'm Kara Sundlun. Thanks for being here. Until next week.